Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 48 Minutes podcast from BLEAV, brought to you by BetOnline. I'm Bruce Bernstein, the former coordinating producer for NBA studio shows at ESPN, where I spent more than 3 decades overseeing NBA content and soaking up knowledge from the best NBA analysts in the business. And along the way, I picked up 4 Emmy Awards and also got to work with great NBA researchers like Michael World B. Freer, my co-host. World B is also a multiple Emmy Award winner who currently works as a senior writer for Stat Factor, where he prepares notes for many NBA announced teams around the league. And our guest today is another very famous ESPN alum, and I've got a special introduction for him after we do a little bit of business. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. And when the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or just unwind with one of our 150 or more slots games. Head to the website today and use promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. Well, here on the 48 Minutes podcast, we have a developing situation. That's one of our taglines of our guest today. We're joined by legendary host Bill Pidto of MSG Network. Bill's one of the most entertaining hosts on TV with his clever sense of humor and highly insightful takes. In his nearly 40-year career, that's right, almost 40 years in the business, Bill has covered many different sports. And if I read his entire resume, well, we wouldn't have time for any other content. But Bill spent 15 years at ESPN. He's been at MSG for the past 16. And among other duties, he is the New York Knicks studio host. Thank you, Bill, for sharing some time with us on the 48 Minutes podcast this week.
My pleasure. Great to see you guys. And Bruce, if you want to be my agent, let's talk after we take this.
You got it. I work very, very cheap. So let's I really do. So anyway, let's jump right in, Bill. There hasn't been this much excitement surrounding the Knicks in about a quarter century. Now, when the Knicks are relevant, how important is that to the league?
Well, I tell you, it takes games away from us as a network. When they weren't very good, and you mentioned I've been there, a decade and a half, and only in recent times have they been in the upper echelon of teams. So a lot of years I've been there, the national networks would only take 3 or 4 games. Now it's maxed out, so that means 12. We lose 12 regular season games because the networks want to put the Knicks on. But I was thinking about this, and I think the NBA has done a great job. You go back to the Bird and the Magic era, it's always about the personalities more than the teams. And while it's a good thing for the league to have the number one media market team to be competitive, I don't think the league is dependent on that, because when you look at Minnesota now with Anthony Edwards, or Dallas with Kyrie and Luka Doncic, or Denver with Jokic, there are a lot of big-time players in not-so-major markets who are really popular. So, yes, it's good for the league, but I don't think it's absolutely essential for the league to have the Knicks be competitive.
Now, Bill, the Knicks have had a lot of big names and talented executives try to turn things around there. And as you mentioned, most of them haven't been successful. So what has made Leon Rose different from the others in recent years?
So Leon has picked a great coach, Tom Thibideau. They have a great history. When you go back over some of the history, for example, Phil Jackson and Derek Fisher didn't mesh because Derek Fisher didn't want to run the triangle. Jeff Hornacek came in, and he was somewhat resistant to the triangle. Steve Mills was someone that was around for many different iterations of franchise reorganization, et cetera, et cetera. So Leon Rose has come in. He's had the great experience as an agent. He's made a great decision in hiring Tom Thibideau. And look, the Jalen Brunson signing has transcended anything that any of us thought was possible in terms of his cost initially, his ability or willingness over the summer to take less to extend, his leadership. No one saw him being an upper echelon point guard to the level that he is. And he's also an amazing leader. I don't know who else in this league takes $113 million and says, okay, I'm going to leave this on the table to extend. If that's not the ultimate sacrifice, I don't know what is. He's just a winner. He's a great face of the franchise. And it's in many ways a family because Leon Rose used to be Rick Brunson's agent. Rick Brunson, of course, is a Knicks assistant. Rick Brunson played for the Knicks when Tibbs was an assistant, and Jalen Brunson was a little boy running around the locker room. Brunson then follows Tibbs as an assistant coach. Leon Rose becomes Tibbs' agent. So in many ways, it's like a family affair. And then you add this whole Villanova aspect to it, where these guys know each other. They're buddies from college. But most importantly to me, they're all high-character players. They play hard every night. It's team first. So Leon Rose, I think, most importantly of all, has done a great job of building a family culture with the Knicks.
And now you kind of talked about on the court stuff, so I want to get into it just a little bit. A player who's not a Villanova alum, OG Anunoby, he's going to have a full training camp with this team. And, while he was very effective last season before he got hurt, how much of a difference do you think it will make for him, for the team, that he's integrated for this system from day one at training camp?
Well, the most important thing for him is to stay healthy. They traded R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley for him. That meant that they absolutely had to sign him when he became unrestricted this summer. So they had to pay him the $42 million, $43 million a year. You may say, how can you pay Anunoby, who's many ways a support player, that much money? Well, they had to do it. They absolutely cannot lose him. He's ideal for Tibbs in that he's a lockdown wing. He's really good at hitting the open three. He doesn't need the ball to create his own shot. And he is so good on defense that when he was in the lineup, the Knicks went 26-6. When he and Randle were in the lineup together in January, before Randle hurt his shoulder, they went 12-2. So he's a perfect fit. Is he worth all the money? Well, he has to be because they had no choice, but they had to keep him.
So, Bill, you mentioned Julius Randle, and, he seems to be something of a polarizing figure in that some observers feel that, the team's offense flowed better when he was out of the lineup. But here's the bottom line, and the way I see it. The team won 63% of the games when he played and 58% of the games when he didn't. So clearly they had a better record when he was in the lineup when he wasn't. But still, there are some fans, maybe because of his style. But how would you explain the disconnect where some fans are sort of like so-so on him, but the numbers say he's really pretty good?
I think Randle kind of suffers from the fact that he just wears his emotion on his sleeve. His issues have not come from not wanting to win and not wanting to play hard. They're a lot of times a reaction to things that don't go well. It has nothing to do with lack of effort, lack of preparation, etc. Now, what's going to be really interesting here is to see how he fits in with this group, because he goes down in January and the Knicks kept rolling. Hart, who was acquired to be a bench player, became a really effective starter. You have the Villanova aspect to the clickiness potentially of this group. I think Brunson's going to do a great job of making sure Randle's included. Another thing that I want to see when Randle's out, Brunson's going to be the guy in crunch time. Is that good or bad now to have potentially two options in crunch time as to who's going to take the important shot? But Randle is a winner. He's always in great shape. I think he's going to be back 100% with the shoulder situation. And look, they need another elite scorer, and Randle is many things, and elite scorer is definitely one of those.
Now, as far as, given how well they performed last season, the Knicks did, and their off-season moves, I'm kind of curious what you think, how close do you think the gap is between the Celtics, the NBA champions now, and the Knicks entering this upcoming season? And do you feel like the Knicks are the biggest threat to Boston coming out of the East?
Well, I think if the Knicks are healthy, they have to be considered a threat. It's going to be very interesting to see how it breaks down if it's the Knicks in Boston. But you can't forget about Philadelphia with Paul George. You can't forget about Milwaukee if they're healthy. Injuries really have slowed them down in the postseason here the last couple of years. Indiana's emerging. Orlando looks like they're emerging with tremendous young talent. So I would say that the Knicks are a definite contender to challenge Boston, but I think there's too many potential contenders to say that the Knicks are the main opposition right now for the Celtics.
Bill, you mentioned Tom Thibideau as, Leon Rose's sort of ideal coach. Now, he's been cited in the past, oftentimes unfairly, I might add, for burning out his key guys with heavy minutes in the regular season. But with the depth that he has this season, there is really no reason for that to be the case, even if it was somewhat of a misperception. In fact, his challenge might be keeping guys happy by giving all of them enough minutes. So what do you feel Thibs' biggest challenge is going to be this year?
Well, I think Mitchell Robinson, and I know Tibbs can't control his health, but Mitchell Robinson's got to come back. Remember, he's had 2 surgeries on that left ankle, and he missed over half the season. And you had the emergence of 3 guys who were not supposed to be starters, who were really effective as starters. Dante DiVincenzo was supposed to come off the bench, but ended up having a great year because Quentin Grimes became ineffective. Hart, in January, I mentioned, became a starter when Julius Randle went down. And Hart, no one had really seen him start as consistently as he did, and he was really good. And Isaiah Hartenstein is no longer with the team. He went to OKC. And when Mitchell Robinson went out, no one knew how good Hartenstein would be as a starter. And it turned out that in many ways he was the X factor for the Knicks in terms of setting the key pick on offense, keeping the ball alive on the offensive board, and playing really good defense. So I think the challenge for Tibbs, keep DiVincenzo and Hart happy, because they were bench players who became really good starters, who are now going to have to adjust to likely less minutes coming off the bench. That's the first thing. Keep DiVincenzo and Hart happy, and also try to figure out what's going on at the center position. Because even if Robinson is healthy, we're all not clear now on what's going to happen behind Mitchell Robinson. Because Tibbs always likes to have a rim protector in there. And Precious Achiewa was re-signed, but he's kind of a 4/5. They really don't have a bona fide backup 5. So I would say keeping everybody happy in terms of DiVincenzo and Hart, and also trying to figure out what's going on at center, are going to be his biggest challenges this season.
Now, Bill, you know as well as anybody, like, so many cities in the Northeast, Boston, Philadelphia, we talked about these teams. New York City is a great basketball town, really a great pro sports town, but, for sake of this discussion, it's a great basketball town. I just wondering if you could describe the atmosphere around the town last season and, the last couple of seasons as the Knicks were making some of these really good playoff runs.
Well, I'll tell you, a home playoff game at MSG, you can barely hear yourself think. It's just electric in terms of the volume and the excitement. And as you mentioned, this city is just dying for a team to take the next step, make a conference final, maybe make an NBA final, and maybe even win an NBA championship. So a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that this is new to have a team that is in the upper echelon of the NBA. Think about how many years a generation of Knicks fans have not seen a winning basketball team. So that adds to it. It's electric. These home games against big opponents or in the playoffs, it's just the volume. It's like being at a rock concert. It's really amazing in terms of the passion and the actual noise in the arena.
And you mentioned a little while ago, a few minutes ago, about the center position being a key for New York because Hartenstein's gone. They don't have a dependable, experienced backup behind Mitchell Robinson. Were you surprised? I don't know if surprised is the right word, but maybe it is. Were you surprised he didn't go out and solidify that backup spot, or is there just not enough room right now, or they like what they see in Jericho Sims in in practices and his time on the court?
It's interesting. Sims seemed like he took maybe a little bit of a step back last year because Hartenstein emerged. Sims didn't play a lot, and when he did, he was often out there for very small samples of time. I think it was a major cap issue. And Achiewa then, when all of the things resolved, had to come back at $6 million. But the fact that they brought Achiewa back, and then the machinations of some of the salary cap situations, I think they are around the trade deadline, may have $11 million or so to potentially go out and get another center. I think a lot of it had to do with a cap situation. And look, they could not pay Isaiah Hartenstein $29 million a year. There's just no way that they could have done that. I don't know if you could justify paying someone who's a part-time starter that amount of money, but regardless, the Knicks didn't have the cap space. So I think these moves were made because of cap restraints. And I think they'll have more flexibility as the season starts to unfold.
Yeah, Bill, you mentioned the Hartenstein situation. I think that's important because you're exactly right. It's not as if they didn't want him to come back. I think they offered him as much as they could under whatever the rules, the contract rules were, as much as they possibly could. And Isaiah Hartenstein decided to go to Oklahoma City because he gets a better deal. So I think that's a good point to bring up when it comes to Hartenstein. It's not that the Knicks moved on from him or anything and didn't want him. They just couldn't. You're exactly right. The cap situation is the contract details of which are too much for me to understand, but they offered him as much as they absolutely could.
Yeah, 17 million was the most they could sign him for, 16 and a half times 4. He went for 29 guaranteed years 1 and 2, so he's making close to 60 million in the first 2 years, and I think OKC has an option on year 3. So they couldn't do anything about it. I don't know that anybody thought that Hartenstein was going to be as effective as he was. Remember, he never started before in this league, right. And thrust into the starting center role, and he became really important in terms of his ability to hit the floater in the lane. I mentioned his ability to set picks and his amazing effort on both backboards. It'll be very hard to replace him.
Folks, you're listening to 48 Minutes with our special guest, Bill Pidto of MSG Network. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about their big offseason acquisition, the newest member of the Villanova Wildcat Brigade. So stay with us. And welcome back to 48 Minutes Podcast. Mikal Bridges, the Knicks gave up a ton to get this guy in the offseason. They stockpile, assets for a reason, and that's one of the reasons is to acquire a premier talent like that. So with Mitchell Robinson's health always a concern, you got Mikal Bridges on the wing, you got OG Anunoby, both of those guys locking down on the wings. You mentioned earlier in the show that, Tom Thibideau loves to have a rim protector, but is the rim protection going to be maybe a little bit less of a major issue if there are fewer paint attempts by opponents who can't get by OG and Mikal?
I think that's a great point and something we're going to have to watch. We've talked about it, our crew. Why not play Randle, Bridges, Anunoby up front? Now, you don't have the classic rim protection, but, Anunoby arguably was the best Knick defender against Embiid in that playoff series. And when you look at opposing fives, how many opposing fives are you really worried about in the NBA right now? Eastern Conference. You got Giannis, right? You got Embiid. Miles Turner stretches the floor. But the bottom line is maybe you can have Bridges and or Anunoby lock down the other team's big and then make sure Randle crashes the defensive board. That would be really interesting to see Randle play and the Knicks go small. In my time, our time with Tibbs, he doesn't do it. He always goes with a standard 5, whether it's Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, Nerlens Noel, when he was a Knick, whatever the case may be. So if he goes with Randle at the 5, that would be a big departure for his coaching style. But it might be something that would work.
Now, Bill, you touched on it just now, but I'm kind of curious. We mentioned how the whole Villanova connection with everybody there. Can you envision a scenario where you see a lineup out there that includes Brunson, Hart, Bridges, and DiVincenzo, and fill in the blank at the middle, just for if for nothing else, for comedic purposes? Not comedic purposes, but just having all the Villanova guys out there at once. Is that a scenario you can see play out during this season?
Very realistic, because you could have Brunson and Bridges, the 2 starters, then you bring in DiVincenzo as an off guard, Hart as a small forward, Bridges be your power forward, Brunson's your point guard, then you need someone to play the 5. I think that's very likely a combination that they're going to use. And I touched on it when we first started. You can't underestimate the character of these Villanova players. They all play hard. They all play every night. They're accustomed to playing tons of minutes. It's team first. And you mentioned Bruce Hall that the Knicks gave up to get Bridges. I think they felt it's worth it. He has a relatively team-friendly contract here for the next couple of years, and he fits the culture, the high-character culture that they're trying to go forward with.
Although they did give up an awful lot to get Bridges, they're not totally without assets. I think I read somewhere they still have 3 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons, something like that. So the cupboard isn't totally bare, but they are in a win-now push with the Bridges deal. Is there anyone on the roster that you see as possibly being somebody where they maybe have one too many of something and somebody might have some value where they can maybe bring some assets back to kind of keep restocking? Or do you feel like what they got is good to go and they're going to go through the whole season with this group?
I think the one player to watch is Randle. Now, he's extension eligible, and I don't think they're going to get that done at this point. We know that when Randle went out last January and Hart moved into the starting lineup, and with a healthy Anunoby, the Knicks were really effective. So we'll see how this goes. I would really doubt that they trade Randle, but if things don't go well and they think that it's time to do that, then I think they might consider that, and they might get a lot of value back for him. I just don't know where a hole would be right now, unless you think that the backup center spot is going to be that big a deal. And now if Mitchell Robinson gets hurt, that changes the whole equation. Aside from the backup center spot, they look like they're locked and loaded and ready to go.
Bill, you mentioned at the top, you talked about Jalen Brunson, his character and his leadership ability. I'm kind of curious your thoughts on the impact of around the team and around the organization. Obviously, it was the organization was happy they spent fewer dollars on, but the decision for him to take a quote unquote lesser deal to help the franchise continue to build stockpile talent and keep talent. What was the impact of that decision? Because it really reverberated across the NBA.
Yeah, I don't know. You guys have followed the league. I can't remember anything like this. Bruce, I got, again, he left $113 million on the table. We covered his captaincy announcement a couple of weeks ago. Just said, hey, he wanted the money now. What the year, if he wait up to next year and gets hurt, who knows? He feels really loyal. He wants to be part of a winning crew. He knows by freeing up more money that it's going to allow him to have more roster flexibility and more ability to sign other players. I just think he put the team first. He also went through the metrics of the fact that when he does sign the extension in 3 or 4 years, he's going to make back a lot of the money that he just left on the table. So still, I don't know. I was thinking about this. Who else has left $113 million on the table in the NBA? I mean, it's unbelievable to me. Yeah, he's making $1 zillion anyway, but still, think about what he passed on.
A few weeks ago on the podcast, shortly after Brunson made that decision, I put forth the following question. Do you think he might actually face any backlash from other players, not necessarily on the Knicks, but maybe other players around the league, saying to him, dude, what are you doing? I'm up for contract now. And now if I don't do something like what you did, our fans are going to call me greedy. I mean, thanks a lot for nothing. I mean, and one of the people that we asked this about said, he might actually get a call from the Players Association about this too. So I'm wondering, if unintended consequences might, cause some players to not be so happy with him about what he did.
That's interesting. But the sums of money, guys, that we're talking about, I mean, at what point is too much? He's still going to make like what? $40 million a year or $38 million a year. I mean, times 4 or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I tell you what, this new TV deal kicks in the year after this, and I think we're going to see our first $100 million a year player. I think that goes without saying. So,
Bill, what do you, when this is all said and done, we're all talking the Knicks, which is, my favorite thing to do here. And, so I'm more than happy to talk about what.
Are you a huge Knicks fan, Mike, or what?
Yes, I am. I've been a long time Knicks fan. I pre Bernard King, as a matter of fact. That's how far back it goes.
The Rory Sparrow, huh?
What's that?
The Marvin Webster Rory Sparrow era.
Yes, my first Knicks game was at the old Boston Garden before the Celtics had Larry Bird, and the Knicks star was a guy named Toby Knight. That's how far back it goes.
There you go.
There you go. I'm curious as far as next season comes, because the hype is obviously we're talking about. The hype is definitely in full effect for this team. What do you think the ceiling is for this Knicks team coming up?
I think they could potentially make the finals. I think they have to make the Eastern Conference Finals. Remember, last couple of years, they have been knocked out in the second round. 6 games against the Heat, 7 games against the Pacers. As good as this past year was, it was only equal to what happened the preceding year. So I think it's really important they take the next step. Eastern Conference Final, minimally, is what I would say.
It's fair to say, as you mentioned, those losses to the Heat, to the Pacers, the Knicks were, it doesn't really matter in the long run, but the Knicks were the favored in those games, in those matchups, and they were kind of upset in each series.
Well, of course, the Pacers series, the injuries just caught up with them. Once Anunoby goes out with the hamstring, forget it. Brunson talks about the fact that they're up 2-0 in the series, and Nembhard hits that miracle in Game 3, and then they end up losing Game 3 to instead be up 2-1 instead of 3-0, and that's something that Brunson's talked about really bothering him this summer, is that they had a chance to go up 3-0 in that series. If they go up 3-0, they're probably going to win the series, even with Anunoby going out.
Well, as a Boston Celtics fan, I cannot tell you how psyched I am about this upcoming season, because all I really want is a Knicks-Celtics Eastern Conference Finals. It will take me back to my youth. I'm a little bit older than both of you guys. I remember the early 70s with Frazier and DeBusschere and Bill Bradley and John Havlicek, Dave Collins. Those were the days when New York Celtic rivalry was really, really something. So if I were to get my wish come May or early June of next year, it would be a Celtics-Knicks final. Is anyone with me?
You think you guys are going to make it, Bruce? I mean,
no, I think that would be electric.
The two best fan bases, I believe, in the NBA. I don't think there's any. I mean, I'll do apologies to Lakers fans and even Philadelphia fans, who I do respect when they're not booing Santa Claus. But I believe the Knicks fans and the Celtics fans are the most intelligent, high IQ basketball fans in the league.
Well, I tell you what, that would be an epic series. Of course, Boston's brought everybody back. They signed everybody. The owner now, I think he wants to sell the team because he's got to pay all these guys all this money. But yeah, I think that would be something we're all hopeful for. Eastern Conference Final, Knicks Celtics. That would be fantastic.
Hey, Bill, real quick.
You got anything else before we say goodbye, World B?
I have one question real quick. Bill, we talked about the atmosphere at Madison Square Garden. You mentioned how electric it was and how it's great during the play. Being specific here for a second, every time you watch a playoff game at Madison Square Garden, even in Philadelphia to some extent, you saw John Starks, you saw Sprewell, you saw Ewing, Larry Johnson, a lot of the old name players that were there. How much of that, I don't want to say how cool that, but how much of those guys, the presence of those guys, add to the atmosphere, what you were talking about?
Well, it definitely adds to the juice. The Knicks do a great job of bringing these guys back. The old saying, once a Knick, always a Knick. Sprewell, Starks, LJ, John Wallace, all these guys are around a lot. They work in the community, and it definitely adds to the atmosphere that you have the last group of Knicks who were able to contend in the Eastern Conference coming back to cheer on the current group. I think it definitely adds to the excitement in the atmosphere, that's for sure. I mean, you see John Starks just coaching these guys as he's watching the game as a fan. It's amazing to watch.
Well, we're all looking forward to that. And again, from our little northeast corner of the country here, we're very excited that these two teams, I believe, will finish 1-2 in the East this year. And then it gets started on opening night. And God only knows what's going to be like if the Knicks should steal that opening game in front of the Boston crowd as they get their rings and the banners. That will, as we said recently, if that happens, it's on. Anyway, guys, Bill Pidto, thank you so much for being with us this week. This was great. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the 48 Minutes podcast presented by Bet Online. We hope you'll join us again next week when we welcome fellow BLEAV podcaster Ryan Ward of the Lakers-centric Jello Jiggin podcast. I don't know what that title means, so we're going to ask Ryan about that next week. Does anyone know what Jello Jiggin might refer to?
No, I can't.
To him.
Yeah. I thought it was Jello Jiggling when I first saw it, but it's actually Jello Jiggin. Ryan Ward, if you're watching this, you'll be asked to explain yourself next week. Bill Pidto, thanks again for being with us. We really appreciate your time and your insight, and we'll see everyone next week. So long, everybody.